Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Behind the Workflow. I'm Simona Costantini.
And I'm Tally Mello.
And today we are here with an incredible guest. Before we get into that, I will share that today's episode is brought to you by Northflow. Behind the Workflow is powered by Northflow, which is a platform that's all about giving creators and agencies a better way to plan and produce content. With built-in Kanban views, task tracking, and file management, it's made for people who manage multiple shows and want more clarity in their workflows. Today, our guest is Laurelyn Ponder. She's the CEO of RelaSocial Studio, a content and social media agency helping food and beverage brands thrive online. And she brings 7 years of educational background and 4 years of marketing experience into her work, blending storytelling with structure, which I absolutely love because I feel like storytelling, maybe we can talk about this in a little bit, is such a key differentiator in marketing going forward. I would be so curious to know your thoughts on this. I feel like we're gonna have to talk about it. Laurelyn is also the host of the Starting Social podcast, where she shares the real life behind the scenes of content creation, strategy, and how media can bring communities together. And her goal is to help creators thrive online and build a lifestyle that works for them and the people that they love. Laurelyn, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you tell us to get started? Because we were chatting a little bit before our recording, but can you just tell us a little bit about Starting Social Studios, a bit about your work, about what you do, who do you help, and what makes your approach unique compared to others?
So, Starting Social Studios was rooted essentially from the fact that I've noticed that online it's very AI driven, not really is story based, and it gets drowned in the noise. So, it's like I have a unique perspective of how can we bring an inclusive marketing perspective to amplify with them, but also really highlight and make efficient content and a strategic content strategy for B2B businesses, whether it's food and beverage or it's podcast agencies. How can they be a service provider, but also adding that unique storytelling twist?
Amazing. I love that. Do we want to talk a little bit about the storytelling side, Tally? I feel like this is like such a differentiator because, and even maybe in just social media clips, like even if you just think about social media content, it always used to be about, you got to grab the hook. You have to have the thing that hooks the person, right? But I'm of the mindset, and I would love to know your thoughts. Sure, the hook is really important, but the story that you're telling in a clip, in an episode or whatever, that's the thing that's going to like really get people into what you're doing. So it's like, yeah. Anyways, I'll stop talking. You go.
So when you're thinking about a clip, you have to have the hook, then you have to have a visual hook, then you have to have ending for that one component. But then people get lost in the noise when it comes to that one clip. They don't really think about the overarching strategy. And so what I work with is small business owners, like pizza owners, bakeries who started this business out of COVID-19 just to generate income, and they created a lifestyle for themselves. And they want to really be successful with social media, but they just don't know how to put that flair, that story. And that's what I focus on is with the copy and with the design and with strategic color blend and content and font formats. That's what I work on is the overarching how to really highlight your Instagram page and your Facebook page or your TikTok, because not a lot of people can afford a website straight out. And so that Instagram especially has been an outform of leads and for small creators to really just showcase their story, showcase what they can offer. And I really bring that out with the one-on-one collaboration, weekend monthly check-ins, and to client reviews through the tools I use as a social media manager.
Nice. I love that you mentioned using Instagram as a website. I've seen a lot of people doing that for their business. But let's talk about tools because keeping up with content across platform isn't just a small lift, right? So according to HubSpot, They actually did a research back in 2023 state of marketing report, and it said that creators spend an average of 6+ hours a week managing social media content alone. Like, that's just the social media content. And that's not even counting like the podcast, video editing, or blogging. So, what tools have you changed like on your overall process the most, especially when juggling like the social, the blogging, podcast, and video as well?
Yeah, so my go-to is typically between 2. It's either RelaSocial, shout out to them, they're a new social media scheduler. I absolutely love them. It
Can
comes
you
from
can you say it again, Laurelyn?
yeah, RelaSocial.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to link it in the show notes. I've never heard of that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so essentially the concept of the creator behind it was on all catch in place, a lot of like workflow where the client can approve it, but it can also be a brain dump. And so I use that strategically with Canva and to create the content and use those pretty simultaneously through email and all the other apps. So I most of my time through my workflow is done through these 2 apps because I bulk a lot of content for these service providers because they just it's a time-consuming process, and I want to make it easier for them. So I usually really juggle between those 2, but also there's email and all these sorts of things, but those are my 2 primary tools that I use in my business.
I love learning about new tools, and I love when creators bring new tools to light because I think that there's a lot of, it's always easier to go to the bigger tool. You know what I mean? It's always
Yeah.
easier to go to the thing that people know the most. And just because it's more well known doesn't actually mean that it's a better tool.
No,
True.
and price-wise, usually the bigger tools come with a bigger price tag, but what I've noticed
Yeah.
is even though it might not be accurate with analytics, you can still look into the native apps. But the thing with Rella that I really love, it's from start to finish, has a Canva integration. They're getting a Google Drive soon integration. And so it's all dumped in one. And it's a fairly new app for, I think it started in early 2022
Mhm.
and just barely launched. But the one thing I really love about it is it's not based on the clients, how many clients you have. And that's usually the spaces that you see your prices rising for clients when they work for podcast agencies and social media agency.
Yeah.
It's just based off the seats that you have, which as a starting up business owner, that's super beneficial that I can have one price for the year and just for one seat. And as I grow and my company grows, then I can accumulate more seats. But for me personally, it's perfect. So I don't have to worry about my space running out, my clients
Mhm.
coming to the future.
That's so cool. So when so you just had mentioned that, as your company continues to grow, I would love to know, especially as like I remember when I first started my agency, a lot of the stuff that I did was like fly by the seat of my pants, and I was like, oh, okay, like we'll just do this thing and we'll just add in this workflow, and I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that, no problem, and like it always worked. You know what I mean? Like we just always figure it out. Would you suggest, and maybe this isn't the best way to phrase this question, but maybe what would you do from the beginning in terms of like systems and processes that you think would be a non-negotiable? Because then I found myself years later in my agency with like no solid system because the whole thing was built on flying by the seat of my pants. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so especially my early systems, like payments been a big issue. Trying to figure out payments for once I get that client, or if a
Mm-hmm.
client comes along and inquires, is having those systems in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took from January to May setting that up. And I think really having that, but in terms of boundaries, definitely having this is your full-time job. If you're starting up owner, you can't work 14 hours. You
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get away from that life, so set structures that work well for you. And the reason why I am so big in inclusive marketing is a lot of people need to have structure where they have breaks throughout the day, and that's where I
Mm.
thrive. And so kind of go in hand of the workflow is make sure you get the system set in place, like your CRM tool, your social media scheduler, and your lead gen in place so you can really start generating the income pretty quickly.
Can I also ask you, because so you've mentioned inclusivity a couple of times,
Mhm.
and I would love to know how and kind of, why you prioritize that in your business, because I think it's such a fantastic thing, and giving people the space to create their business in the timeline that works for them, in the space
Mhm.
that works for them, because there's a lot of shoulds in business. You have to have this set up by this date. Your website better be done by this date, and you should have 5 posts that go out every single week. But if we take it back, the inclusivity piece, can you share a little bit more, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, about why that's important in your business as your business ethos? Because I think it's a really powerful one.
Yeah, so collaboration and being inclusive is key to me as a business owner because inclusivity highlight that story, highlight that voice. A lot of people are in these AI bots using ChatGPT for these methods, especially these small owners, because AI has become such a clutch to generating content that it's missing the highlight voice. So I work with inclusive owners and neurodivergent owners because we can work a structure and workflow that works for them. And I have preset packages, but if they only have the bandwidth to approve 10 posts in 2 weeks, then it's a collaborative process of I will generate that content for you, and we will work in other areas of how we can consult you and thriving in your business as a neurodivergent person, because a lot of people start freelance just so they can have that balance of taking care of themselves mentally and physically, and also being a thriving career person. Wh and that's where I started from, was I need a sort of balance and structure because I know I wanna put in the work, but a lot of people don't do well in corporate cultures, and there's a method of you have to get a college degree, you have to get possibly a master's to go this track, and then you work 30 years. And the world is changing where boundaries of workplace environment is changing to where it can be curated and customized to the person, but also having that open environment where it's not toxic to where you can take the time for yourself when you need to.
I love that. I think that's so important. I remember when I worked in corporate, not to go down the whole corporate rabbit hole, but I remember when I worked in corporate, the last corporate job that I ever had, I would take walks at lunch, and I would go for, a little walk. My lunch was 30 minutes long. And I would go for a lunch, and I'll never forget. I came back this one time, and my boss at the time literally yelled at me for going for a walk. And I was like, that is crazy behavior. I'm like, where
Uh-huh.
in the world, why would you ever want to work somewhere where you get yelled at for going for a walk? That's literal basic care of yourself. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyways, kudos to you. I think it's
Yeah,
really important.
and lay of that is I still work the X amount of hours as a
Yeah.
startup, but I have breaks throughout the day, and that's
Mhm.
essential for business owners, especially in food and beverage. They're constantly on the go for 14 hours. They don't have the
Yeah.
time to do social media. They don't have the bandwidth. They're short on staff. So that partnership that I have with them and that relationship just in general is key to any sort of growth that they want to see 5, 10, 15 years down the road,
Yeah.
where they are today when they first start just thinking, "Oh, I really need social media." It's just growth mechanism to really scale my company.
Beautiful.
Yeah. With that in mind, I'm curious, just what has helped you stay focused and overall protect your energy, and just setting guardrails, when you're talking to new clients, how you're planning on keeping up with that.
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned before, setting those boundaries of this is when I'm working unless it's an emergency. Like my my Facebook has been hacked. Just setting those boundaries so I can get that rest. And also I can spend time with my family and knowing that I will give 100% if I have those flexibilities. But in terms of the mindset, what keeps me going, it's just meeting different brands and hearing their story and tuning into their content strategy and really highlighting that within the personal pages, like doing staff shout outs, doing different recipes, doing behind the scenes work, doing photo shoots, doing user-generated content, and all these different components to really highlight who they are as a person, as a founder, or as a business.
Beautiful. I love that. Can we really quickly I have to ask you about your podcast. So you have your podcast and our show's called Behind the Workflow. So we have to talk a little bit about your podcast workflow. But are you using your show as like a lead gen tool into your business ultimately?
Since I'm just starting out, that will be the goal. But right
Amazing.
now, I'm really just using it as a community.
Yeah.
How I positioned my podcast different from what I do as a social media manager in my packages is I use that podcast as a community for aspiring social media managers and teaching them like what are these concepts, how to go about this, how to set firm deadlines, how to build your workflow around what you can do bandwidth wise, and really just as a sounding board of "You got this. This is such a great community, collaborative, it's friendly, there's so many wonderful people that I've met through my freelancing career just from starting in January. And it's just as a community for them to listen to as a mental check-in of like, hey, you got this, and we'll get through this together. This is like a mini lesson that you could really implement today after the end of this episode. So it's sort of curated towards those aspiring social media managers that really just don't know if that should be a career change for them, or they're interested and they don't really know what educational steps they need to take. And I also talk about that as well as they're in high school and they're interested in this. So here's the process of where I'm at today.
That's so cool. I love that because it helps like future generations think about work differently. Like we're always going to have corporations. You're always going to have people who are going to, fill those different roles. But I think we're also in a time right now where a lot of people have realized how much power they really have and within themselves and how much they can truly make a difference in their work when you're given the space to, create in the way that you want to create. And so I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, so a lot of podcasters, they struggle to repurpose like their content across social media. Do you have any go-to tips or workflows for turning one episode into multiple posts?
Well, not in terms of workflow, but like I look at the piece of content and if they want to grow, convert that to a reel. Post on multiple sections, find a really good sentence that you said and repurpose it and use it strategically. If it's a blog, repurpose it into a caption or an email marketing. If it's really good with valuable content, look at the value in the story that you want to tell. And then I take that component and then spread it across multiple different avenues of a carousel, a part two podcast, wherever they want to go, even a YouTube, because I've seen res restaurateurs being like, "I'm gonna get into this industry, but I don't really know." And it's a great way because YouTube and podcasting has become such a great long form format of welcome to my cooking shows, for an example. And it's a great way to connect with the audience, but show what you can do and why you started and what your products can be at your brick and mortar store, whether you already have an existing one or you're building to get one.
So just to bounce off the idea of like the content repurposing and all that, from a workflow point of view, how do you keep yourself kind of on track when it comes to the podcast production side of, of your shows? Like you have your episodes, you have your posting cadence. What do you do to kind of take us through your workflow, if you will, for that? And if there isn't really a crazy one, like that's totally okay too.
Yeah, it's not really crazy. What I do is, since I'm so new to this, I map out an outline and then I just script it out. And then I just sit behind my desk and I get my setup running and I just record. And then that's where I ad lib from there because I'm a solo host. So there's not this back and forth of a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's like I have to have those main points in place and then I can create the lesson from there. And so that's how mostly where I go is I literally just script everything that the 3 points I want to make, and then I just develop the episode from there. And it takes a lot of writing, it takes a lot of time consuming, but it works for my brain because I know that the 3 points have hit at the end of the episode, and it's not like I'm jumping off a wall or anything and changing topics. It's always that one main key point can go with this example, and then it goes to this example, and then I can create a visual.
Absolutely. And one thing that I like that you said there too is like, so I have this debate with my clients all the time. Should it be fully scripted, or should you just do bullet points, or, so on, so on? Should I, read off of a teleprompter, or, like there's so many different ways to do it. And what I really like about our conversation is like the giant permission slip that everyone is getting just to create the content in their way, in the best way that it works for them, which I think is fantastic. Does your show have a video component as well, or are you an audio podcast?
I'm an audio podcast, but hopefully I do have a YouTube, but just so I can have that name holder, but I'm hopefully going to grow more visually over time. But currently I'm just on a podcast setting.
I love that. As a producer, I would recommend take your audio versions of your episodes, put a graphic on it and turn it into a video and upload them to your YouTube channel, because even we did this with a client, I don't know, like a couple years ago now, and her channel made it to monetization status just off of audio based podcasts. Wow. So there's there's still a huge place for it, and people think, you have to be, of course, like having video content is like the easiest, thing, because you can just like take it and repurpose it, but it's also not easy for a lot of people though too, doing video.
Especially when you're a solo person. I've dabbled, like if you look at my YouTube, I dabbled, and you see me speaking on this audio format, but it's not in the correct space, so it looks like I'm reading off my monitor. And so it's just like, how can I curate this? And so that was great that you pinpointed of just a graphic over the audio. I did that when I was in corporate world, and it did great.
Yeah.
And it generated what it needed to get leads.
Exactly. Which is like what I think a lot of the times people underestimate the power of audio. But at the end of the day, this is something that I say, all the time. Audio is kind of the basis for everything that you create. Whether, how I want to explain this properly. So you have an audio podcast that you can turn into a visual. Having it as a visual or a video or transcription on it or captions, those are all different ways for people to be able to consume the content that that you're putting out there, right? So, let's say if you're hard of hearing or if you can't see or whatever, you still have a way to consume the content. So there's an accessibility piece to it as well. But if you think about it, content all starts with words of some kind, right? It all starts with an audio component. And so I get a lot of questions all the time about, do I have to have a video side of it? I don't think that you do. But what I would say is you have to have a way for the content to be accessible to people who want to hear it, and whatever that looks like, whatever format or way that looks like, so that, so that everyone can access it, because I think that's really important, right? Do you have any thoughts? Any thoughts on that before I keep going?
So, little social media tidbit when it comes to accessibility. Alt text and captioning on Reels actually is a secret weapon that Instagram boosts you, because it's friendly to consume in all sorts of formats. You don't always have to have a visual component, but as long as you have that voice, and that's why I work with the business owners that I do. I start with a script and a little small outline, but with my copywriting help, but I just tell them up front, this is your story that you want to tell. I want to make sure it's in your words and your captions. So when you review the caption, make sure it's something that you would say. And I can switch out the words. I can make it longer. I can make it shorter, but at least it reflects who you are as a person. And so if you find that as a basis, then that inclusivity and that community and that volume just comes as you grow, and the existing big brand have a component where they can really collaborate and show a different side to themselves that they didn't show when they first started, because they're more confident now.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had said that the show is audio based. Can you give our listeners some tips of how to take audio based content and use it on social? Like if you're trying to tap into like videos, like how do you take your podcast? Like how do you promote it? What are your go-tos for promoting your show?
Yeah, so when it's audio based, I typically put it in a carousel or for reels, I just, like you've mentioned, I put a graphic behind it or a stock footage of what the topic talks about with the caption, text over video essentially, or of what I said, or I'll just record myself in behind this like background B-roll and put the caption on there and do a voiceover. It's different ways you can repurpose, but you don't always have to be talking head, even though that's favoring in a lot of accounts. If you're not comfortable looking straight at the camera, there's other ways to go about it, like voiceover or text over video.
I'm so glad we have technology to be able to do that nowadays. Yes. Yes. So, a big theme in your works is showing creators how to thrive online and while also building a lifestyle that feels good. So, what does that balance look like in your own life? And I would love for you to tell us about your dog as well, just while we're at it.
Yes, so that lifestyle, like, especially in the mornings, I spend a lot of time with my dog and at evenings too, so I curate my lifestyle around my golden doodle. I love her to death. Her name's Daisy, and she is as rambunctious as she can be. So she is so calm when I'm working in the afternoon that I can actually work that, but the days that she's like a toddler, if you think of a two-year-old puppy,
Mhm.
you're thinking a toddler, and sometimes a teenager some days, and so I work around the lifestyle I wanna have, be a dog mom, be around my family, be able to go to an event that my boyfriend is in school and really curate that lifestyle and that structured where I can still meet deadlines. And so how I go about that is I work what's best for me in my hours, and then I make sure I'm very responsive within standard business hours through email. So just in case somebody comes along and they want to shoot me off an email, I make sure that I'm very responsive on email. But if they want to have a video call, then I make sure that's when I'm at my desk and I'm active, which is typically in the afternoons.
Love that. Amazing. Laura Lynn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I've loved this conversation. We're so grateful to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Where can our listener find you so that they can connect with you and learn more?
Yes, so in terms of my podcast, I'm on Spotify and Apple, but mostly I'm primarily posting on Instagram with anything and tips-wise of how to improve your social media strategy if you're a food and beverage business. And they can also, if they want to inquire about services, if that's popped in their brain from this episode, they can inquire on my website. It's startingsocialstudios.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was such an honor, and I love this conversation. So I would gladly come back again.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. Thank you.
Yes. So
Yes,
nice to
thank
hear your
you.
story.
I
Yes.
know. I know. I love it. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for our listener today for tuning in to the podcast. And we will see you next time behind the workflow. Bye.
Bye.